Hey, hello, and good morning. Welcome to everyone who is joining with me today for this daily devotional. This is the series called Rooted in God's Word. We are studying the book of Genesis. Today we are in Genesis chapter 9, verses 18 through 29. This is episode number 19 of our study of the book of Genesis. We're getting ourselves partway through the book and a lot to go, but we want to keep going into the story of Noah and his family. Now, last time we saw that God's covenant was made with Noah and with creation. He gave them the symbol and the sign of the rainbow, not something that had ever been seen before. But now they would see it as a result of the floods that happened. Prior to the flood, the world would have looked very different, but after the flood, there was great change that would have happened in the world. We're going to go on with the story today as we look at what was going on in the story of Noah and the rest of his life. The remainder of his life will be wrapped up in just one story and then a couple of phrases that will wrap up the story of Noah. So let's get into this story today, starting in chapter 9, verse 18. Now, this is an odd story. It's kind of a weird story that got thrown into the mix, and the story really sets apart the conflicts that happen in the Middle East, the conflicts that would happen between nations, between people groups. There was constant turmoil in the Middle East, and a lot of that you can see it on display in what happened here in the sin of Ham, one of Noah's sons, and then also in the way that God responded to the son of Ham, whose name was Canaan. And he is the one that's ultimately going to bear the brunt of the punishment that's going to happen as a result of this kind of bizarre story that happened here in Genesis chapter 9. So let's look at this together. It says this: Now the sons of Noah who went out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And Ham was the father of Canaan. Now you're familiar with that son, or the name Canaan, because you've probably heard of not only land of Canaan, but the Canaanites, who were really at conflict with the Israelites from this point in time. And so you're going to see different people groups, by the way, in the book of Genesis that really are the basis of what the Middle Eastern really the Middle Eastern nations or the Middle Eastern peoples are today. You're going to see the conflicts that will take place with Isaac, that is going to be born to Sarah and Abraham. But before Isaac was born, there was a guy by the name of Ishmael that was born. You see the story of Jacob and his brother Esau that would be born later to Isaac, and Esau and Ishmael and Canaan. All of these are forming the basis of what many of the Arab nations really became, and have been at war with the Israelites ever since. And so you see a lot of the people groups coming out here from the very beginning of creation. So the sons of Noah went out of the ark. The three sons emerged from this catastrophe that the flood was into a completely brand new world, a world that they have not experienced, that they did not understand quite how to handle from this point, but they just went back to the normal everyday life as best as they as they really could. From these three sons, the whole earth was populated. So from the sons of Noah, the whole earth would be populated. So you have the line from Adam and Eve down until you get to Noah. Noah's three sons, out of these three sons became the population of the world. The entire world came out of this genetic line. So you have Shem, you have Ham, and you have Japheth. Now the descendants of these three sons are going to be listed in a table of nations in the next chapter, chapter 10, that we're going to look at starting next time that we get into this. Well, there's a sin that is committed in the midst of this, and this is the sin of Ham, which was one of Noah's sons, who was the father of Canaan, who would become really the people group of the Arab nations. This was the first sin that was talked about after the ark, after God destroyed everything. So sin didn't get destroyed. It was still there. This was the first sin that was going to take place after this, and it was going to really relate to drunkenness and potentially sexual perversion, depending upon how you define this story and really what the meaning of the story is. Because it's our best guess as we get into this story, because we really don't know specifically. But if you think of drunkenness and sexual perversion, that a lot of the sin of the world today really results to those two things. It relates to drunkenness and a sexual immorality or sexual perversion that takes place. Both of these are outside of what God's plan is, his ultimate design for his creation. These are contrary to what God wants. These are outside of God's obedience. These are deliberate acts of rebellion and disobedience against God that we still really tie into today. So it's the sin of drunkenness and the sin of sexual immoralities. Well, let's look at the story and try to figure out what the story means together as we go through this. Let's go to verse 20. So it says that Noah began to be a farmer and he planted a vineyard. Making his way into the new world after the flood, Noah began to provide for himself and his family by being a farmer. He would grow crops and raise crops in order to be able to actually eat. He planted many things. One of the things that he planted was a vineyard. It says that he drank of the wine and was drunk. Now, the vineyard obviously would have grapes. The grapes would become made into a grape juice. The grape juice would be fermented, and if you drink the fermented drink, it will make you drunk. And this is exactly what happened. He drank of the wine and was drunk. By the way, wine in the Bible, the first reference to the word wine is, in fact, grape juice. So anytime you see the word wine, it is grape juice. When wine becomes fermented, it turns into that strong drink. It turns into that fermented drink. And that is what he would have drank of. Now, this is the first mention, by the way, of drunkenness in the Bible. And some think it was only after the flood that man either made or was able to make intoxicating drink. Now, we don't know if that's the case or not, but there's a lot of people that speculate that that was the case. We do know that this was Noah's actions. Noah's own sinful, shameful actions show the foolishness of drunkenness. It reminds me of what it says in Proverbs chapter 20 and also chapter 23. It says, wine is a mocker. Strong drink is a brawler, and whoever is led astray by it is not wise. Goes on to say this, who has woe? This is in chapter 23, verse 29. Who has woe? Who has sorrow? Who has contentions? Who has complaints? Who has wounds without cause? Who has redness of eyes? Those who linger long at the wine, those who go in search of mixed wine. Do not look on the wine when it is red, when it sparkles in the cup, when it swirls around smoothly. At the last, it bites like a serpent and stings like a viper. Your eyes will see strange things, and your heart will utter perverse things. This is the foolishness that really Noah engaged in at the very beginning, and that was that he engaged in this kind of drunkenness. This kind of drunkenness would have created the ultimate problems. If Noah had not gotten drunk, none of the other problems would have occurred. But because Noah got drunk, he created the situation for other problems. Now, it's not to say that Noah is 100% responsible for everything that happened here, but he is responsible for his part, and his part was getting drunk. His part was drinking the wine when it was that fermented wine, when it was sparkling and when it was like a viper. It bites like a serpent. It stings like a viper. And it says your eyes will see strange things in Proverbs. Your heart will utter perverse things. And so that's Noah's responsibility. Now, the sexual perversion and the sexual sins that could happen are the responsibility of Ham, but they're not the responsibility of Noah. But that was the first sin that was talked about in the Bible. So what happened after he became drunk? Well, he became uncovered in his tent. What does it mean that he became uncovered? It was he was in his tent naked. And Ham, the father of Canaan, so the son of Noah, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers outside. Now, what does it mean that he saw the nakedness of his father? Well, that's been the source of controversy from the time that this was written. Nobody really knows exactly what it means that he became uncovered. It may be one of two things. One, that Noah was sexually abused by one of his sons, probably Ham, or his relatives in some way. Now, the phrase that says became uncovered and the idea that he was naked, many times it can be associated with sexual relations. Leviticus 18, chapter 18, verses 6 through 20 is a good example of that it can be related to sexual relations. This is a repulsive thing if that were the particular case. It's not surprising. It's not terribly surprising. Many people who get drunk become victims of abuse, both sexual and otherwise. A large majority of men and women involved in date rape situations were drinking or taking drugs before the attack. According to some of the statistics, half of all rapes involved alcohol. There are more costs, though, to drunkenness than just that. It was recorded that in the 1990s, that in the United States, 100,000 people died each year in alcohol-related deaths. While alcohol abuse may cost the nation hundreds of billions of dollars every year. So it's very possible that because of the alcohol, that there was some kind of a sexual abuse that occurred. Now that's one speculation, but that's not really confirmed. We have to speculate if that's the case. The other idea, it says that he saw the nakedness of his father. So some believe that Ham's only sin here was in seeing Noah's drunken, uncovered state, and he went out and he made fun of him, mocking him as a father and as a man of God. Now, literally, the ancient Hebrew text says that Ham, quote, told with delight when he saw his father's tent. He determined to mock his father and was undermining his authority as a man of God. So there's two possible scenarios when it says that he saw his father's nakedness. When he was uncovered, he saw his father's nakedness, and he told his two brothers outside. So either there's sexual immorality and perversion and abuse that took place, or he is ridiculing and making fun of his father, thereby undermining his father's authority as in the eyes of the rest of the entire family. We don't know what happened. We can only speculate. Well, let's read the rest of what happened, and we'll just leave that speculation there because we can't really be sure. I tend to think and lean toward the side because it doesn't really say that there was any sexual abuse that took place, and you don't want to read into the Bible. You just want to read what the Bible says and interpret it that way and use the Bible to interpret the Bible. But I tend to lean to the point of he came out and made fun of his father, ridiculed his father, was mocking his father, thereby undermining his father's authority as the father and as a man of God around them. It doesn't mean that a man of God can't fall, can't sin and make mistakes, but the mocking of him is where Ham crossed the line. So I tend to read it that way because it reads more clearly in the text. So here's what it says. Shem and Japheth, the other two brothers, took a garment, they laid it on both of their shoulders, and then they went backward. They walked backwards into where their father was. They didn't want to look at what was going on, so they laid the garment over their father. They covered the nakedness of their father, and their faces were turned away, and they did not see their father's nakedness. So they let Noah have dignity. They let his authority stay intact. They did not mock him and ridicule him and shame him and make fun of him like their brother Ham did. So again, either it was sexual abuse or it was ridicule and mocking and undermining the authority. Either way, it was wrong, and it all started with Noah making a stupid decision to get drunk on the wine that really created a lot of this mess that they were in, as alcohol always does. This is why I believe God doesn't come out clearly and say that you should not drink, but I think it can be implied that drunkenness or drinking even will lower your guard. It will lower your inhibitions. It will affect your brain, and a lot of mistakes are made when alcohol is involved. Most often, when the greatest regrets happen in people's lives, alcohol somewhat was in that. It played a role in the whole process. Well, again, just speculation. Again, just looking at it. But now we want to see Noah and how he responded to this and the curse upon Canaan, which was the son of Ham, the grandson of Noah. We don't know if Canaan was involved, but somehow he was going to bear the consequences of what his father had done, which goes to say, and it goes to talk about that the sins of the father will be go against the son. The sins of the father will bring about punishment even on the son. So let's look at this. So Noah awoke from his wine He was sober, knew what his younger son Ham had done to him. So either he had sexually abused him or he had mocked and ridiculed him. Again, we don't know. But Noah was angry about this, whatever he had done. And he said, "Cursed be Canaan." Now again, who's Canaan? That's the son of Ham. The punishment is going to be carried out on the son of his son. So the grandson of Noah is going to bear the brunt of the punishment that Ham rightfully deserved. Cursed be Canaan. Well, what's the curse going to be? He will be a servant of servants. He shall be to his brethren. So he will be at the bottom of the food chain. He will be at the very bottom of all of the sons and the grandsons and the families that would happen. Canaan would come last. All of the authority that Canaan should have had will come last. Now, again, think of who the sons were: Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Japheth, being the youngest, would have had the least amount of authority. Ham, being the second, would have had the second amount of authority. Shem, being the first, could have had the first amount of authority, but Ham was placed at the bottom through his son Canaan. So he awoke and he said, "Cursed be Canaan, you will be at the bottom. You'll be a servant of servants to all of your brethren, all of the family members." And Noah said, and Canaan said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge Japheth, and may he dwell in the tents of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant." So his younger son, Noah knew what his younger son had done to him. This seems to indicate that whatever happened to Noah, it was even more than one of his sons or grandsons seeing his nudity. So this explains the strength of what this curse is. So maybe Ham brought all of the family members in to look at Noah and his nakedness. Maybe he was making fun in front of all of the family members of what Noah had done, or maybe there was sexual abuse that took place among other family members. Again, you don't really know, but there is something that happened because there is a strength in the curse that is given to Canaan. Now, it seems strange again that if Ham is the one that sinned against Noah, that Canaan, Ham's son, would be cursed. Perhaps Canaan was involved in this sin against Noah in a way that it's not mentioned in the text. Again, that's speculation and reading into it. Perhaps the strongest punishment against Ham was for Noah to prophetically reveal the destiny of his son Canaan. We don't know. We can trust God is not punishing the son Canaan for just the sin of the father Ham, because this really does go against the heart and the justice of God in Ezekiel 18. However, through Noah's prophecy, God told Ham exactly what would happen to his son. And it's the result of what Ham had done, or maybe Canaan was involved as well, that the generations that would follow would be at the bottom of all of this. Now, this would create the Canaanites, who would war against the Israelites, who would be looked down upon by the Israelites from this time forward. Now, Canaan was the father of the Middle Eastern, Near Eastern peoples, many of whom were conquered, by the way, by Joshua when Israel would take the promised land. Though they would not completely conquer them, they would not do what God had told them to do. Well, we come to the end of Noah's days, and we've been studying Noah for a little while. We come to the end of his days, really unceremoniously ending when it says this in verses 28 and 29 of chapter 9. "And Noah lived after the flood 350 years. So all the days of Noah were 950 years, and then he died." Now, Noah was a remarkable man. He served God in his own generation. He served him faithfully in his own generation, where the rest of the people did not. Yet his last years do not seem to match the glory of his first years. If you notice, the last story about Noah compared to the first story about Noah was not good. He really went downhill. It was really a decline, when God expects us to keep going uphill and keep growing in our faith, growing in favor with the Lord. Well, regardless of all of that, his days were 950 years. Noah was a man of great triumph and of great weakness. His godliness is remembered in the New Testament, marking him as a man of faith. Hebrews 11:7, it says, "By faith Noah, being divinely warned of things not yet seen, moved with godly fear." He prepared an ark for the saving of his household, by which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is according to faith. So we see Noah really being remembered as a man of faith. We also see him as what is called a preacher of righteousness. In 2 Peter chapter 2 verse 5, it says, God did not spare the ancient world, but saved Noah, one of 8 people, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood on the world of the ungodly. So the life of Noah really was a life of faith. He had some struggles. It wasn't always perfect, as life never is. Our lives are never perfect. Yet it's a struggle of faith. It's a walk of faith. It's a journey of faith. It's a trusting God in his miraculous grace that he offers to each one of us, despite the fact that we aren't perfect and we don't measure up. God still pours out his grace on undeserving people out of his kindness and out of his favor. Well, that is the end of the story of Noah. We're going to pick it up in chapter 10 next time and keep moving on. Now remember, in our whole timeline, just to keep this in your mind, that from creation to the time of Noah, that was 1,000 years. From Noah to the time of Abraham was another 1,000 years. So what we're going to see pretty quickly is going from Noah to Abraham in 1,000 years of time taking place in the white spaces between the words that we are given. We don't know a lot about that time, but there's a significant amount of time that goes from Noah to Abraham. Well, thank you for joining me today, and I hope you have a blessed day, and I look forward to joining you back here again for our next devotional in a couple of days. Thanks for joining me.